I just want to give you a wee bit of introduction to the farm and where we are, our journey that's got us to where we are today and where we would like to go. So Knock is a farm of about 430 hectares, 1,100 odd acres, situated on the south slopes of Knock Hill, about 10 miles north of Huntly in Murray, right on the boundary with Aberdeenshire. Beth, my wife, and I farm the place in partnership, and we have farmed the place since late 1989. We took it over from Beth's parents, and we are the third generation of her family to be farming the place. Two previous generations had farmed the farm well, and as has been mentioned, I think, by everybody tonight, soil was at the heart of their philosophy on farming, and soil is very much at the heart of our philosophy on farming. And maintaining soil quality is definitely what good farming to me is all about. In 1989, we moved to the place, having farmed previously a tenanted farm for about 5 years before, and then Beth's father retired and gave us a chance to take it over. About the same time, SNH, or NCC as it was in those days, approached us with an intention to declare part of the farm an SSI, and this was what became known as Shearwood Pastures, which is owned by ourselves and several neighbours. And around about 1990 or so, that was designated as such. And that, in many ways, started to change our approach to the way we farmed it. We had a lot of cooperation from SNH and a lot of information by the field officers about why this little bit of land was being declared an SSI. And it really got us starting to appreciate, or it gave me anyway, a bigger insight into the responsibilities that go with land management. The farm today is run as a mixed farm, and it ranges in soil type from peatlands on the Knock Hill, covered in heather, right down to through good loamy soils, down to some poor draining wetlands, which is part of the Shearwood Pastures SSI. So we have a great diversity of opportunities to manage different qualities of land. As I say, today the farm is run as a mixed farm, and we have about 70-80 suckler cows, 400 odd breeding ewes, and grow about 150 acres of crop. In addition to that, we have a livery business and do quite a lot of horse events and training opportunities as well. And we finish all the progeny that we produce. So everything leaves the farm, well, pretty well everything that leaves the farm goes for slaughter. The farm has been farmed organically since 2006, and that put a real challenge back into farming for us, and it certainly has been a challenge we have really enjoyed. Around about the turn of the start of the 90s, we were persuaded to produce a conservation plan for the farm, again funded by SNH at the time, and it was carried out by one of the FWAG advisors, who had recently started with Grampian FWAG, and again, the information that came from that started concentrating our minds on the wider responsibilities that go with farming the place, more than just running a farm. And I think over the next 4 or 5 years, we realised that we weren't just farmers, we actually had a far wider responsibility, and we were managers of that land that was known as NOC, or is known as NOC. And it's a very, not an onerous responsibility, it's a real privilege to have that responsibility. And slowly over time we've realised that the successful management of that land is a really integrated operation, and we have always adopted a holistic approach to this management strategy. Today I like to think that we run a fairly balanced farm. We have a balance of different breeds of livestock. We have a balance of different activities on the farm. We have a balance in our approach to managing the grass, and I think this balance is the key to successfully managing land. In an earlier life, I was an economist and spent many years, several years, teaching students about all the economic tools we have, like gross margins and profit and loss accounts, etc. But really, I do not believe that we can farm successfully and look at one enterprise in isolation from another. Everything is interrelated, and I think that's part of the problems that farms are built up today, is that they've looked at what they considered to be the profitable side of it and neglected the real benefits of having diversity there. Today, as I say, we've found the place organically, and in the current situation of the 1,100 odd acres, about half of it is native pastures, woodlands, or what we'd call rough grazings, and the other half is either permanent grass, improved grasslands, or arable land. And in amongst all that, about 250 acres, 300 acres of it, almost a third of the farm, is now woodland, and not farmed as such. Some of it will become more grazed woodland in time, but a third of the farm is now down to trees. And we have, over the last 10 years, monitored our carbon situation, and I think we've done an assessment of it 4 times over that period. And the last one was done around Christmas time, just past, and for the first time we are now at a zero carbon situation. Indeed, we're slightly on the right side of it. And I find that quite an interesting figure, because there we are farming in a really reasonably low cost situation, medium quality land, farming it organically, a third of the place in trees, and finally we've got to a zero carbon situation. So we buy very little fuel, we buy no fertilizer. Most of the fuel that we heat with is produced on the farm. We have our own turbines, we have our own PV panels, so all these things contribute to it, and finally we've got to a zero situation. So I think that's quite a challenge for the rest of the industry to face. We have been heavily involved in pretty well every conservation scheme that has been on the go since the early 90s, right from the Countryside Premium Scheme, indeed from some of the original conservation projects that were handled by FWAG, North Grampian Conservation Project, and things like this, right through to the current EEC schemes. And we have learnt a lot. We like to think we've had a little bit of influence on the system, and we have become disillusioned, I would say, today. The development of conservation support, to me, is going way down the wrong route. It's become very complicated. It has become far too prescriptive, and I feel today that there needs to be a major rethink of the way conservation support is given to farmers. As organic farmers, greening is something that we can ignore because we are so green anyway. And I like to think that we do run a balanced enough situation that at least is something that we don't have to fall into line with. But the regulations surrounding the current AIC scheme is, and indeed its predecessor, the Rural Priority Scheme, is really, to me, it appears to be designed to make it easy to administer, but very, very difficult for the participants to successfully utilise. And I think one of the bugbears of it is that the operations have become so prescriptive, and there is no recognition of the achievements that have been made. And I really feel we need to think about how we can reward farmers for achieving an objective rather than for going down the route of trying to hit a target and never actually checking that he does hit that target. So who, for instance, goes around and checks that the hedge that the country has just paid for has actually been looked after, and who in 10 years' time goes and looks at that hedge, and who in 10 years' time says to that land manager, you've done a good job there. Nobody does, and nobody says to the guy that pulled out the hedge 5 years later that you shouldn't have done that. And I think one of the classic one that really gets me at the moment, I suppose, is the management of our SSI. And as I said, the SSI was declared in 1990 odd, and tremendous support from SNH over it. And about 3 years later, maybe 6 years later, the SNH, I think, maybe came up with something called the East Scotland Grassland Scheme. And although when it was initially declared an SSI, we got no money for it, and we were quite happy just to carry on managing it as we were, and that was no problem. The government then offered us money under the East of Scotland Grassland Scheme, which was fine. If you want to offer us money, that's fine, I'm not bothered. And we had to carry on managing it, as we'd managed it since 1926. And I think we had to measure the grass growth in it, which, if you know what rough ground looks like, is just, to me, is absolutely ridiculous. How can you measure the food production from a rush here and a bit of sedge up there, or something that's, it's such a, you look at a scope of land like that and you decide how much, whether or not there's enough production there to feed animals. Anyway, we fell into line with that, and slowly the schemes have evolved, and the grazing requirements of it had to be noted, and it started off being we will put cows down there from May to December, and we'll maybe put, next time I think it was maybe put down 50 cows between May and December at some point, and that's fine. That gave us enough flexibility. The last scheme that came out was that we have to put down X number of cows. I think we settled on 40 cows on after the 1st of September, and they must be removed on the 30th of November, 30th of October, or something along those lines. Now, how can you possibly expect to manage something so sensitive and so important to the nation as an SSI by somebody telling us that that's the prescription you've got to settle on? We need the flexibility to decide how we manage it, and SNH put down very able scientists every 4 years to monitor it, and they look at it and they decide how we're doing, and we discuss it. If there's a problem, we'll resolve it. But you've taken, by opting for the options under the 8th scheme, we have lost that flexibility, and the only reason it is like that, as far as I can see, is that as far as the inspectors go, the only way they can monitor what's happening there is to go down and count cows. The thing was never declared an SSI because of the number of cows you kept down there. It was declared an SSI because of the flora that existed on the site, and it's the success of managing that flora that is what the reward should be for looking after that area of land. And I would say the same about the many other options that are being offered, like wetland creation or species-rich grassland creation. All these things, farmers want to do it. Farmers want to learn about it. It is a learning process, and the grants should be there to encourage them to do that. But they need the education, and they need the support to carry out these things successfully. And they don't need a prescription on how to do it. They know best how to do it. All they need to do is agree that that's an objective we want to achieve, and you have to find a way of encouraging them along those lines and keeping them looking after that as time goes on. Okay, it's just a wee hobby horse on it's getting me at the moment, but I think, you know, we have an audience here which is set to look at the changes in the way that we deliver support and advice to farmers in the next few years. We have a fantastic opportunity coming up to make those changes. And I just sincerely hope that we can find ways of rewarding people for doing things rather than telling them or making them stick to a system which, okay, is negotiated at the start, but you must give credit to the ability of the land managers to work out the best strategy forward for their farm, because each place is individual. And the people that farm it probably know more about managing it successfully than a third party, and it's silly in my eyes to carry on paying people when there is no system of coming in and checking it. What they said they were going to achieve, they have achieved, and they are looking after. Okay, I think that's really all.